I used to think being his right hand meant I was indispensable. I was the one who knew his schedule better than he did, who could calm a room full of restless investors with a single confident update, who worked late nights drafting strategies that won him contracts worth millions. My name was Mia, but in his world, I was never more than my secretary. For a while, I didn't mind. I told myself titles didn't matter, that the quiet dinners after hours and the stolen weekends in private resorts meant something. I told myself I was building something with him, not just for him. Then one rainy Thursday afternoon, while I was finalizing a presentation for a merger we'd been chasing for months, my phone buzzed with a headline alert: Adrian Parker to wed Evelyn Cross in winter ceremony. I stared at the photo, Adrian in a tuxedo, Evelyn on his arm, all pearls and smug smiles. The caption called it a power union between two empires. My chest went hollow. That night, I confronted him in his penthouse. He didn't look surprised, only annoyed, as though I'd interrupted something important. "Mia, you're overreacting," he said, pouring himself a drink. "You knew what this was. You were my second choice." The words hit harder than the betrayal. Second choice. Like I'd been kept on a shelf until he could secure something better. I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I left his glass untouched on the counter and walked out, past the elevator, past the guards who didn't even meet my eyes, and out into the rain with nothing but my bag and my phone. I resigned the next morning with a single-line email. No explanation, no forwarding address. For weeks, I avoided the city center entirely, refusing calls from curious colleagues and mutual acquaintances. People speculated I'd gone overseas, burned out, broken down. Let them think it. In reality, I had disappeared into the private office of Victor Hayes, a retired magnate who had once been a family friend. Victor had built his fortune in luxury real estate and global hospitality before selling everything and retreating into selective investments. He'd always liked my work ethic, and when I told him I wanted to learn the game from the top down, he didn't ask why. He simply poured me a coffee and slid a contract across the desk. 3 years, he said. You'll shadow me. In return, you'll put everything you learn into building your own empire. I signed without hesitation. Those years were brutal and brilliant. I sat in on negotiations that made my old job look like a dress rehearsal. I learned how to spot weaknesses in competitors, how to turn whispers into leverage, and how to command respect without raising my voice. By the time Victor introduced me to Daniel Carter, a rising investor known for his aggressive acquisitions, I was no longer the woman Adrian had dismissed. Daniel was sharp, charming, and far too observant. Over coffee at a rooftop lounge, he studied me like a puzzle. "You've got the look of someone with unfinished business," he said. I only smiled. I wasn't ready to share my past, not yet. But I knew this much. Adrian Parker wouldn't see me coming until I was sitting across the table from him as his equal, or better. And when that day came, I'd make sure he understood exactly what it meant to call me his second choice. The city looked different when you weren't chained to someone else's schedule. For years, I'd rushed from one meeting to another, memorizing routes to Adrian's favorite lunch spots, memorizing which board members preferred whiskey over wine, memorizing how to keep him calm when negotiations got tense. Now I moved at my own pace, the skyline no longer a backdrop to someone else's empire but a blueprint for my own. Victor kept his promise, he threw me into everything. I shadowed him in boardrooms where the air felt thick with money and power, where men 3 times my age underestimated me until I slid a file across the table that cut through their arguments like glass. I spent late nights reviewing financial reports until I could read a company's future in a single balance sheet. I traveled to Milan to learn the art of luxury branding from an Italian design house Victor had shares in, and to Dubai to observe how exclusivity could be sold as status. I learned that real power wasn't loud, it was quiet, controlled, and impossible to ignore. By the end of my second year, I was no longer Victor's protégé. I was his partner in deals that other investors didn't even know were happening until the contracts were signed. That was when he introduced me to Daniel Carter. Daniel was younger than most of Victor's circle, but his reputation was already formidable. He specialized in hostile takeovers and strategic acquisitions, moving fast and leaving competitors scrambling. The first time I met him was at an exclusive investors' dinner in Singapore. I wore a black silk gown and a diamond pin Victor had given me after closing my first solo deal. Daniel noticed the pin immediately, then me. "You're not just here to smile and nod," he said after introductions, his eyes glinting like he'd caught me mid-strategy. "What's your game?" I gave him the same answer I gave anyone who tried to read me. "Winning." He laughed, and over the next hour, we talked numbers, markets, and the subtle art of making an opponent feel like an ally until you took what they valued most. By dessert, he was leaning back in his chair, studying me like I'd confirmed his suspicions. "You've got history," he said. "Not the boring kind. The kind that keeps you awake at night." I didn't confirm or deny it. Some stories needed to stay hidden until the right moment. Within months, Daniel and I became partners in a new venture, a luxury brand conglomerate aimed at acquiring struggling but prestigious companies and restoring them to market dominance. It was ambitious, risky, and exactly what I needed. We started with a boutique French perfume house on the edge of bankruptcy. Within 6 months, it was the most sought-after brand at high society galas. Then came the acquisition of a Swiss watchmaker, followed by a British fashion label that had been drowning in debt. Each success tightened our grip on the industry, and the name of our holding company, Carter & Lane, began appearing in the same sentences as the largest corporate players in the world. I kept my name out of public interviews, letting Daniel be the face while I stayed the strategist in the shadows. But behind the scenes, my influence was absolute. And then it happened. A deal landed on our desk that made my pulse quicken, a high-profile fashion brand, known for exclusive partnerships with celebrity clients, was up for acquisition. The same brand Adrian's company had been courting for months. I read through the reports, seeing every flaw in their offer, every weak point we could exploit. Daniel caught the look in my eyes and grinned. "Personal?" he asked. I gave him a cool smile. "Business." In 3 weeks, the deal was ours. The announcement hit the financial press like a lightning strike. Adrian's wife, Evelyn, had been preparing to unveil a partnership with the brand at a winter gala. Now, that partnership was gone, replaced by an exclusive contract with Carter & Lane. Industry gossip exploded. Who was the woman behind the move? Why had the brand shifted so suddenly? I stayed quiet, but inside, something sharp and cold unfurled. It was the first strike, and it landed exactly where I wanted. Adrian didn't know yet. But soon, he would. And when our paths crossed again, it wouldn't be as secretary and CEO. It would be as 2 players in the same game, only this time, I was holding the better cards. The invitation arrived in a heavy cream envelope, embossed with gold lettering that caught the light like it was daring me to open it. A luxury gala in the heart of the city, celebrating the year's most influential leaders in the fashion and lifestyle industries. Carter & Lane had been named among the honorees for our rapid rise and innovative acquisitions. I didn't need to read the guest list to know Adrian would be there. This gala was his playground, the kind of event he and Evelyn used to dominate with perfectly staged photos and whispered deals over champagne. Daniel noticed the subtle smirk tugging at my lips when I set the invitation down. "I take it we're going," he said, already pouring 2 glasses of wine. "It'll be fun," I replied, though fun wasn't the word for what I had in mind. I spent the next week preparing, not just my appearance, but every detail of the narrative I wanted to craft. The right dress, tailored to perfection in deep emerald silk. A limited edition necklace from our newly acquired jewelry brand, so rare that the press would take notice. And Daniel, of course, in a custom black tuxedo that made him look like the very definition of dangerous elegance. When we arrived at the gala, the flash of cameras followed us from the entrance. Daniel placed a hand on the small of my back, leaning in just enough for the photographers to assume we were more than business partners. The room was a symphony of crystal glasses, soft jazz, and murmured networking. I scanned the crowd until my eyes landed on him, Adrian Parker, looking exactly as I remembered but somehow smaller. He was standing with Evelyn, whose smile was stretched too tight, her gown dazzling but her eyes calculating. It took him less than 5 seconds to see me, and when he did, the glass in his hand stilled. His gaze traveled from my face to Daniel's hand, and something dark flickered in his expression. I gave him the kind of polite, detached smile you'd give an old acquaintance, then turned my attention to a nearby investor, letting Adrian simmer in the uncertainty. Throughout the night, I felt his eyes on me. During the awards presentation, I took the stage alongside Daniel to accept the recognition for Carter and Lane's success. My speech was concise, confident, and laced with subtle references to resilience, vision, and the strength it takes to walk away from those who underestimate you. The applause was thunderous, but it was the look on Adrian's face that made it unforgettable, confusion tangled with something that looked almost like regret. Afterward, as I stood by the champagne tower, Adrian approached. His smile was tight, his voice lower than usual. "Mia," he said, as if tasting the name for the first time in years. "It's been a long time." I tilted my head, feigning mild surprise. "Has it?" Before he could say more, Daniel appeared at my side, effortlessly inserting himself into the conversation. "Adrian Parker, right? Carter and Lane appreciate your enthusiasm for our recent acquisition." The emphasis was deliberate. Adrian's jaw tightened. I let Daniel lead me away, the sound of polite laughter and clinking glasses fading as we moved toward the balcony. The night air was cool, but my blood was warm with victory. This was only the beginning. Adrian now knew I wasn't just back, I was untouchable. And I was about to show him exactly what that meant. The days following the gala were a study in strategic silence. I knew Adrian would be circling, trying to understand how I had gone from his secretary to the co-owner of a company that could outbid him without blinking. He wouldn't ask directly, men like him never did, but he'd send feelers through mutual acquaintances, make casual inquiries at events, maybe even try to charm information out of people who didn't realize they were being played. I counted on it. While he wasted time speculating, Daniel and I were already moving on our next play. A luxury home decor brand with deep ties to elite interior designers was slipping in market share. Adrian's firm had expressed interest in buying it, hoping to use the acquisition to strengthen their foothold in the luxury real estate sector. By the time his team drafted an offer, ours was already signed, sealed, and wired. The press release went out on a Monday morning. By Tuesday, the industry blogs were buzzing, not just about Carter and Lane's win, but about the rumor that this was the second time in months we'd intercepted one of Adrian's deals. The whispers about the mystery woman behind the company only intensified. That was exactly how I wanted it, my name surfacing just enough to intrigue, but never in a way that tied me directly to him. That week, I received an unexpected lunch invitation from Vivian Cross, Evelyn's cousin and a known gossip with a sharp tongue. I accepted. Over truffle pasta and champagne at one of the city's most exclusive rooftop restaurants, Vivian leaned across the table with a conspiratorial grin. "Word is, Adrian's not taking these losses well. He's been distracted." Her eyes glittered with mischief. "Some say it's because of a certain green dress at the gala." I let out a soft laugh, swirling my wine. "I'm sure the color was memorable." She tilted her head. "You know, Evelyn doesn't like competition. Especially not from someone with your history." I met her gaze evenly. "Good thing I'm not competing." Vivian studied me for a moment, then smiled like she'd just decided to keep my secret, for now. Information like that was currency in our world, and I'd just bought myself another layer of intrigue. Back at the office, Daniel was reviewing the home decor brand's integration plan when I walked in. "Vivian?" he asked without looking up. "Vivian," I confirmed, dropping my bag onto the leather sofa. "She's fishing, but she's not dangerous. Yet." Daniel glanced up then, his expression unreadable. "You're enjoying this?" I arched a brow. "Wouldn't you?" He smirked. "I do. I also know that people like Adrian don't let things go. He's going to make a move. I hope so, I said, because the truth was, I was ready for it. I didn't just want him to see me win. I wanted him to realize he had been nothing more than a stepping stone to the version of me standing here now. That move came faster than expected. 2 days later, I received an email from Adrian's assistant, different from the one I used to know, but clearly trained in the same clipped efficiency I'd once perfected. Adrian wanted to meet. No specifics, just an invitation to discuss potential collaboration opportunities. I forwarded the message to Daniel, who called me 5 minutes later. "So, are we going?" "Of course," I said, "but on my terms." We arranged to meet at one of Carter and Lane's properties, a rooftop bar in a 5-star hotel we'd renovated last year. The view alone was enough to make any guest feel slightly smaller, slightly off balance. Adrian arrived right on time, dressed in the same tailored perfection I remembered, but there was a tightness in his shoulders that hadn't been there before. He offered a handshake. I gave him a nod. "Mia," he began, his tone smooth but strained, "it's impressive, what you've built." "I think we could, you think wrong," I cut in gently, the way you might correct a child. "I didn't build this to collaborate with you." Daniel, leaning casually against the bar, let the silence stretch before stepping forward. "We have a full calendar, Adrian." Was there anything else? Adrian's jaw flexed, but he smiled anyway. "Just, congratulations." He left without finishing his drink. I watched him go, feeling nothing but the quiet satisfaction of knowing that for the first time, I was the one ending the conversation. Adrian's failed attempt at civility only made me more certain that he was going to escalate. Men like him didn't handle losing with grace. They doubled down, convinced they could outmaneuver anyone if they just pushed hard enough. I didn't have to wait long to see what that looked like. A week later, one of our active acquisitions, a heritage leather goods brand in Spain, suddenly hit a snag. Our local partners reported that a rival firm had swooped in with an inflated offer, promising immediate payouts and faster expansion into Asia. That rival was, of course, Adrian's company. On paper, it was a smart move. In practice, it was a mistake. The leather brand's owner, a shrewd older man named Carlos, had already developed a strong rapport with me during negotiations. He trusted me because I understood the brand's legacy and made it clear I wasn't looking to gut it for quick profit. When Adrian's offer landed, Carlos called me personally. "They think money will blind me," he said in his accented English. "But money without respect means nothing." I smiled, even though he couldn't see it. "Then let's close this properly." We flew to Madrid the next day, Daniel and I side by side in first class, reviewing the final paperwork. By the time Adrian's team realized Carlos had signed with us, the ink was dry and the announcement was scheduled. The news broke while Daniel and I were having dinner at a Michelin-starred restaurant in the city. I didn't check my phone immediately, but when I did, I saw a string of missed calls from numbers I recognized all too well. Adrian was spiraling, and I wasn't even in the same time zone. "You're dismantling him piece by piece," Daniel said over dessert, his tone more amused than surprised. "Is that the plan?" I sipped my wine, meeting his gaze. "The plan is to win. If dismantling him happens along the way, that's just efficient multitasking." We returned to the city the following week to find the industry press in a frenzy. Carter and Lane was being hailed as the fastest rising luxury empire in recent history, our portfolio expanding at a rate that made analysts double-check their numbers. And for the first time, a feature article mentioned me by name, not just as Daniel's partner, but as a driving force behind the company's strategy. My photo was on the front page of a major business magazine, taken at the gala in the emerald dress. The caption read, "Mia Lane, the woman changing the rules of luxury business." I knew Adrian would see it. That was part of the point. What I didn't expect was the follow-up, an invitation to be the keynote speaker at an upcoming business summit attended by the city's most influential CEOs, including Adrian himself. Daniel dropped the invitation on my desk with a grin. They want you front and center. I picked it up, scanning the details. Perfect. The weeks leading up to the summit were a blur of preparation. I wasn't nervous. Not about speaking, not about Adrian's presence, not about the press coverage that would follow. I'd worked too hard, sacrificed too much, to let any of that shake me. The morning of the summit, I chose a sleek black suit with sharp lines and understated gold jewelry. Power and simplicity. As I walked onto the stage, the lights bright and the room full of expectant faces, I caught sight of Adrian in the third row. He was watching me intently, Evelyn absent for once. I started my speech not with numbers or market projections, but with a story. Years ago, I worked for a man who thought titles defined worth, I said, my voice steady. He thought a secretary couldn't become a CEO. He thought loyalty was a resource to be used up, not valued. What he didn't understand was that some of us don't just take orders, we take notes. There was a ripple of reaction through the audience, subtle but unmistakable. Adrian's expression tightened, but he didn't look away. I finished the speech with applause ringing in my ears, my eyes never leaving his. This wasn't revenge. This was evolution. And I was only getting started. The summit shifted the balance more than I anticipated. In the days that followed, my inbox flooded with offers, partnership proposals, acquisition opportunities, invitations to speak at other events. Our brand value skyrocketed, and industry analysts began speculating that Carter and Lane might soon rival the top 3 luxury conglomerates in the world. It was the kind of momentum most CEOs would kill for, and I knew Adrian felt the sting of watching it unfold without him. What I didn't expect was his next move, a direct challenge. Late one Friday afternoon, Daniel walked into my office with a file. "You'll want to see this," he said, dropping it onto my desk. Inside was a proposal Adrian's firm had submitted for a landmark property in the heart of the city, a historic department store set to be transformed into a luxury shopping destination. The space was iconic, its location unmatched. Winning it would mean controlling the most prestigious retail address in the country. "He's going in aggressive," Daniel said. "It's a blind bid process, but I have a friend on the review panel who says Parker's offer is massive." I closed the folder and leaned back in my chair. "Then we'll go bigger." Over the next week, we assembled a proposal so airtight it left no room for debate. We offered not only a higher purchase price but a visionary redevelopment plan that would blend heritage with modern luxury. I personally met with members of the panel, ensuring they understood our commitment to preserving the building's history while elevating it into a global destination. When the decision was announced, the headline was simple: Carter and Lane secures landmark property over Parker Group. Adrian didn't attend the press event, but I knew he'd be watching the live coverage. Standing on that stage with Daniel beside me, answering questions from reporters, I made sure every word reinforced the image of Carter and Lane as the future of luxury, and Adrian's company as the past. That night, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Enjoy it while it lasts." I didn't need to guess who sent it. Daniel glanced at the screen and smirked. "Threats already?" "He's unraveling." I put the phone face down. "Let him. The more desperate he gets, the easier it is to predict his next move." And I was right. Within days, Adrian began slashing prices on several of his flagship products, trying to lure clients away from our brands. It was a short-sighted play, one that risked damaging his own margins. Daniel and I responded by launching an exclusive members-only club through Carter and Lane, one that offered unparalleled access to our brands, private events, and limited edition collections. The club became an instant status symbol, and our sales surged. The irony was delicious. Adrian had taught me many things about the business world, but he'd never understood that loyalty, once broken, doesn't return. Now I was using that lesson against him. By the end of the quarter, Parker Group had posted its first significant profit drop in years. Adrian wouldn't see it as a market fluctuation. He'd see it for what it was, a personal defeat. And for the first time since I'd walked out of his penthouse all those years ago, I felt like the scales were tipping fully in my favor. But the game wasn't over. Not yet. The following month brought the invitation I had been waiting for without even realizing it. A private charity auction hosted by one of the city's oldest and most exclusive social clubs, the kind of event where fortunes changed hands under the guise of philanthropy. Only a handful of CEOs were ever invited, and this year, both Carter and Lane and Parker Group made the list. Daniel caught my eye when we received the details. "He'll be there," he said simply. I smiled. "Good. Let's make it count." I chose my ensemble carefully, a deep sapphire gown that caught the light with every step, paired with diamond earrings from our own collection. Daniel, ever the perfect counterpart, wore a classic tuxedo, his cufflinks engraved with the Carter and Lane logo. We arrived together, the kind of entrance designed to be photographed. The auction room was a blend of understated opulence and pointed networking. Waiters glided between guests with crystal trays, and the air hummed with quiet competition. I spotted Adrian across the room, speaking to a cluster of investors. He noticed us almost immediately, his gaze flicking from my face to Daniel's hand resting lightly at my back. The auction began with rare wines, antique jewelry, and art pieces that drew murmurs from the crowd. But it was the final item of the night that stole my attention, a luxury retail space on the ground floor of a soon-to-be-renovated tower in the financial district. It was prime real estate, perfect for a flagship store. Adrian's company had been rumored to be hunting for a location exactly like it. When bidding opened, he jumped in quickly, his offers confident, his tone steady. I waited until the room was hanging on his every move before raising my paddle. The crowd shifted, whispers starting instantly. Adrian glanced at me, a flicker of something in his eyes, recognition, maybe even dread. We traded bids, each higher than the last, the numbers climbing past what most in the room had expected. Then, at the perfect moment, I leaned toward Daniel and murmured a figure that made his brows lift slightly before he nodded. The auctioneer called it. Sold. Carter and Lane had just claimed the prize. The applause was polite but tinged with surprise, the shock of watching a duel play out in real time. As the event wound down, Adrian approached, his smile brittle. "That was bold," he said. I tilted my head. "It was necessary." Daniel joined us, his voice smooth as silk. "Business is about seizing opportunities, Parker. You taught us that, didn't you?" Adrian's jaw tightened, but he said nothing more, retreating into the crowd. Outside, as our driver pulled up, Daniel looked at me with a rare hint of curiosity. "You could have let him have it. Why didn't you?" I fastened my seatbelt, glancing out the window at the glittering skyline. "Because it's not just about winning deals anymore. It's about making sure every door he tries to open leads back to me." Owning that retail space sent a ripple through the industry far louder than the actual auction itself. Within a week, analysts were speculating about Carter and Lane's expansion plans, and luxury blogs were running side-by-side comparisons of our growth versus Parker Group's decline. Adrian had been on the defensive for months, but now he was cornered. He tried to fight back with a publicity stunt, an extravagant launch party for a new product line that Evelyn's team had been hyping for months. The event was hosted at one of the city's most prestigious hotels, complete with celebrity guests, champagne towers, and a wall of photographers. What Adrian didn't know was that Carter and Lane had quietly secured a contract with the hotel's parent company earlier that year, giving us final approval over event sponsorships. 2 days before the launch, I made a single phone call. The champagne tower stayed, the celebrity guests arrived, but every display, every menu, and every decorative detail prominently featured Carter and Lane branding. By the time the press photos hit the wire, Parker Group's big night looked more like a Carter and Lane showcase with Adrian as an uninvited guest. The backlash was swift. Social media roasted the oversight, industry insiders whispered about disorganization, and even Evelyn was caught on camera looking furious. Daniel found me in my office the next morning, holding up his phone with a grin. "You've officially replaced him as the industry's golden image," he said, showing me the headlines. They're calling you the queen of quiet takeovers. I smirked. Quiet works until it doesn't. Then you make noise. And noise was exactly what came next. We announced a major charity partnership, tying Carter and Lane's name to a global education initiative for underprivileged youth. The press coverage was massive, not just for the goodwill but for the timing. Our announcement landed the same day Parker Group released their quarterly report showing a steep drop in profits. Adrian finally cracked. That afternoon, my receptionist buzzed me to say he was in the lobby asking for a meeting. Daniel looked up from his desk when I walked into the boardroom. You're actually going to see him? I want him to see me, I said simply. Adrian entered a moment later, his polished exterior straining under the weight of frustration. You've made your point, he said, not bothering with pleasantries. I stayed seated, calm and composed. Which point would that be? That you can win a few deals, take a few shots at me. I cut him off with a steady gaze. This isn't about a few deals. It's about building something untouchable. You once told me I was your second choice. Now I'm your only competition. His jaw clenched, but he had no answer. Daniel stood then, placing a hand on the back of my chair in silent solidarity. We have another meeting, he said, dismissing him without saying the words. Adrian left without looking back, and as the door shut, I felt it, not the rush of victory, but the quiet certainty that the game was almost over. After that meeting, Adrian went quiet in a way that told me he was plotting something bigger, something desperate. Men like him didn't retreat unless they were trying to find a way to land a single, devastating blow. I didn't wait to see what it was. Daniel and I doubled down, accelerating our expansion into sectors Parker Group hadn't yet touched. We launched a luxury travel division, partnering with elite resorts and private jet services. It was the kind of move that didn't just boost profits, it created an entire lifestyle brand around Carter and Lane. Investors loved it, clients adored it, and within months, we'd secured contracts that locked out Parker Group from even competing in the space. Then came the whisper from one of my contacts at a private bank. Adrian was planning a merger with a mid-tier luxury goods company, hoping it would inject enough capital and market share to stabilize his crumbling image. On paper, it looked like a lifeline. In reality, it was vulnerable. Daniel and I went to work quietly. We contacted the other company's board under strict confidentiality and made a counteroffer, not just hire, but paired with a promise of complete creative control and access to our global distribution network. We didn't even need to fight for it. The board voted unanimously in our favor. Adrian's merger collapsed before it even began, and the news hit the financial press like a thunderclap. For the first time, articles didn't just frame Carter and Lane as a rising star. They painted Parker Group as a sinking ship. That was when I got the invitation to a closed-door investment summit, the kind of event where billion-dollar deals were whispered over single malts and signed without a press release. I knew Adrian would be there. And I knew exactly what I wanted to do. Daniel and I arrived together, projecting the image we'd cultivated from the start, united, untouchable, and in control. The summit was held at a secluded mountain resort, all glass walls and roaring fireplaces. Inside, clusters of industry titans talked in hushed tones, their entourages hovering at the edges. I spotted Adrian near the main bar, speaking to a group of potential investors, men I recognized as some of the wealthiest in the sector. Without hesitation, I walked over, Daniel just a step behind me. "Gentlemen," I said smoothly, offering my hand. Mia Lane, Carter and Lane. They knew my name. More importantly, they knew my reputation. Conversation shifted almost instantly, the investors eager to hear about our expansion plans. Adrian stood there, smiling thinly as the spotlight slid away from him. By the time the evening ended, 2 of those investors had scheduled private follow-up meetings with me, meetings I knew Adrian had been chasing for months. Later, in my suite, I stood at the balcony overlooking the snow-dusted mountains, a glass of wine in my hand. Daniel joined me, his expression unreadable. "You've taken everything that mattered to him," he said finally. "What's left?" I thought about it. The contracts, the properties, the reputation, yes, I'd claim those. But what I really wanted wasn't something I could take from him. It was something I could give myself. Freedom. The freedom to never again be defined by someone else's choices, to never again wait for permission to lead. One more move, I said, my voice steady. And then I'm done. Daniel's gaze lingered on me, something softer in his eyes than I was used to seeing. And after that? I looked out at the horizon. After that, I build for myself. Not for revenge. Not for anyone else. Just me. But first, I was going to make sure Adrian Parker understood exactly what it meant to underestimate me. The final move came in the form of a deal so perfect it felt like it had been waiting for me all along. A multi-brand luxury complex was up for sale. A sprawling property in the center of the city that housed flagship stores, high-end restaurants, and event spaces used for some of the most exclusive gatherings in the industry. It wasn't just prime real estate, it was a crown jewel. Whoever owned it would control not just the space, but the narrative of luxury in the city. I knew Adrian would go for it. In fact, I counted on it. When the sale was announced, both Parker Group and Carter and Lane were invited to submit offers. The seller was a discreet investment trust known for favoring buyers with vision, not just money. This was my advantage. I didn't approach them with a number first, I approached them with a plan. I painted a picture of the complex as the epicenter of a global luxury experience, flagship boutiques connected by a rooftop garden, private lounges for elite clientele, and an event hall designed to host everything from runway shows to charity galas. I tied it all back to our brand's ethos. Heritage, innovation, exclusivity. And then, in a meeting Daniel arranged behind closed doors, I secured the backing of 2 major international partners to sweeten the deal beyond anything Adrian could match. Weeks passed in tense silence until the call came in. Carter and Lane had won. I didn't celebrate right away. Instead, I scheduled a press conference to announce the acquisition, making sure the timing overlapped with the annual Luxury Trade Expo. A massive event Adrian was attending as a keynote speaker. When our announcement went live, it stole every headline, every social media mention, every camera flash. By the time Adrian took the stage at his panel, the audience was already buzzing about Carter and Lane's victory. Later that night, at the expo's closing reception, Adrian found me on the terrace. The noise from inside drifted out in soft bursts, but out here, it was quiet. "Congratulations," he said, though the word sounded like it had been dragged out of him. "You've built something incredible." I studied him for a moment. The man who once told me I was his second choice now looked like someone standing in the shadow of a legacy he couldn't match. "I didn't build it to beat you, Adrian," I said evenly. "I built it to be free. You were just the first lesson." He didn't reply. There was nothing left to say. I walked past him, Daniel waiting by the door. He didn't ask what Adrian had said, and I didn't offer. We left the reception early, the city lights reflecting off the windows of the car as it carried us back to our office tower, our tower. The next morning, the headlines crowned Carter and Lane the undisputed leader in the luxury market. My face was on the covers, my name in every article. And for the first time, I realized I didn't feel the hunger to prove myself anymore. I'd already done it. In the months that followed, I focused on expansion, but on my terms, choosing projects that excited me, turning down offers that didn't align with my vision. Daniel remained by my side, a constant in a world that never stopped shifting. One night, as we overlooked the city from the top floor of our headquarters, he asked, "So, what's next for you, Mia?" I smiled, the skyline stretching out like an open road. "Whatever I want." I had been his secretary, his secret, and his second choice. Now I was my own boss. And that was the only title that mattered.